All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Missing Links. What's up?
Going through my third of life crisis. I bought a snake.
Yes, John bought a devilish looking snake.
Cute snake. Don't hate on the snake.
Well, we got a good topic, John, that you picked out this week.
It's another level of craziness.
All right, let's just restart.
I bought a snake. I'm at that level of my life, Rock. Help me.
Just think about that cookie. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Missing Links with John, Brock, and myself, Stephen King, where we discuss what's missing in Web3 architecture. For feedback, please go to missinglinks.fm, send us an email, give us some feedback on what we discuss and what you'd like us to cover next week. All right, let's get into it. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Missing Links. Hey, guys. How are you?
Doing good. Going through my third of life crisis. I bought a snake. So yeah.
Yes. John bought a devilish looking snake.
Cute snake.
And
don't hate on the snake. I'm gonna learn parcel tongue and it's gonna invade.
You have the most generous wife of all wives. My wife would throw me out of the house, throw the snake out of the house, and throw me out of the house. And yeah, it's just I could never bring something like that in my house.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, we got a good topic, John, that you picked out this week on starting a new company in Web3 in this ecosystem, and it's actually relevant because we just started a company, and we started at the exact week that FTX. I think it was the exact day actually we started raising money that FTX that everything was announced for FTX.
Yeah.
And yeah, we didn't plan that, but it's made raising money a little bit more difficult, but possible. So, John, you kick us off, man.
You got it. All right. So the question becomes, considering a lot of the macro and microeconomic factors that we're starting to see in the world around finance, conventional finance, Web3, and DeFi, as well as some of the scandals we're seeing, inflation, all these other factors. The question becomes, is this a good time to really be looking at VC money and really trying to build the next level of Web3 technology? We had that discussion, we all did at the end of in our 2022 review about the idea that the year of 2023 and 2024 is going to be the build year. So is that hold true at this point? What do you think?
Should be, yeah. I mean, this is the down cycle when, yeah, you see VCs scared to invest. The tourists, if you will, in Web3 aren't around anymore. So now's the time to build down technical debt and innovate.
This is the best bear market that I've ever seen in terms of building. I mean, there's look, every bear market's the same. It's like there's almost like a PR campaign. It's really interesting actually to see. It'll be, one day they'll be doing college case studies around just the marketing aspect of crypto, because crypto was definitely dead in 2018. Like the same messages were being voiced everywhere, and so like I was just on Twitter, and every Twitter headline is negative. But you talk to guys like you, John and Brock, and different companies, and there's real building and real value being created beyond just like JPEG images and things like that. And there's actually real companies getting into the space. So there was talk of this in 2018 too, around what were they called, enterprise chains or
public. It was almost like Hyperledger, right? Like it's almost like a public blockchain between private entities in a way. It's a semi-public chain.
Like permission chains, like Hyperledger and things like that. But it was all talk. Nobody was really actually doing anything. But now it seems like there's actually, like, Nike's definitely, Adidas, there's definitely companies in it. So, and it feels different other than all the negative headlines.
Yeah, so the one thing I have, and for anyone who doesn't know me, I tend to be a little more conservative, a little bit, but I feel, well, how I understand it is that I feel like there's two different economies here. The bear market for what we're seeing with, this quote unquote recession we're seeing globally with all the money that's spending, and then a separate recession for the crypto space, the Web3 space, because you see certain sectors doing well, and then everything else is just kind of blowing up. So I'm kind of curious on your thoughts and your takes on, do you think these two independent bear markets, if you want to call them independent bear markets, will kind of join into one, or will they still stay silo until they kind of join up later on once kind of integration, development, building, and adoption is kind of solved? Because everywhere there's a down market. I don't think you can argue that.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, so I think everywhere you look, there is some downwards trajectory in the market, but the question becomes, is that equally shared across, Web3 and other markets, or is this just, specific to just Web3 currently?
No, I mean, I think if you look at any metric, the global economy is going down. Yeah, the recession's all over. It's globally, this is a down cycle.
I'm curious just on the infrastructure side, right? So like you guys have been through a couple of these cycles, in every cycle it gets a little bit better. I mean, what's going on with the technology and the infrastructure? It's getting better. I get that. There's new layers, which actually makes things more complex for you guys because you kind of have to know not only just like the EVM, but you have to be able to translate that. Hey, should we build, on the EVM, or should we do one of these layer twos, or what is going on with these ZK snarks? Trying to understand stuff like that can make your head spin. And so in 2017, you had to know ERC20, and Solidity and a few other things. Now we've got these different layers of abstraction. How do you guys think about that, or how do you educate yourselves so that you stay up to date?
Well, for me, the bear market actually makes that easier because there's a lot of consolidation. So you see which projects last are still alive. Like you're seeing right now, there's a huge centralization around the Ethereum ecosystem. Whereas a year ago, you had all of these other projects popping up.
I was going to say, like, I'm being a little bit of a purist. Like, yes, the bear market helps the consolidation component, but it also makes it inherently a little bit more centralized from the understanding that ideas and kind of entities are now one. So if you have a lot of L2s that failed or consolidate, you have this kind of component of where things are kind of pushing during the good times. People are more risky and like, we're going to be as like decentralized as possible, completely, and well, I don't want to say completely, but to some degree excluding user intuitive factors that are needed to actually onboard people. So I feel in this bear market, it's not just to say, oh, it's simpler, we need to consolidate. The user experience and the onboarding experience is very crucial because we've had this issue before. Stephen, how many times have you had to explain, what the hell a wallet is when we are trying to get, MLSs on board when we were building a product? That's still an issue. And this was back in 2017, 2018. It's been a hot sec, and it's still an issue.
That's not going away. I mean, so that the problem was, I don't see, look, consumer facing apps, like the thing that's nice now is that you're getting younger people like Gen Z. You guys are Gen Z, right?
I'm a millennial. Come on.
You guys were born in like 2004.
We're all the same generation.
We're all the same. You're
all the same generation, Stephen.
Yeah, come on.
You guys just look much younger than me.
You're the grandfather of the generation. We're the little pups, but we're all millennials.
Yeah, one child it works, but when you have two or three, it ages you exponentially. It's logarithmic. I can't say that word.
With that exponential logic, are you now a boomer? You just past it. You're in your 60s now.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel that way. So, I still think it's too early though for consumer facing apps. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Unless it's an NFT, I think what Starbucks is doing is interesting. My wife uses those credits all the time. And so I think it doesn't seem like rocket science for them to be able to pull this off. Maybe they already are, actually. I know that they've been playing around with the tech. So I don't know. I haven't tried it, but I don't think we're at the consumer level yet. I would never build a real estate app or a social app. I guess that would depend on a couple of different things. Right now, I think there's a lot of infrastructure, and the only reason I'm learning this is because of you guys. You guys are always building customizations, and that's why I asked the question: Is are we at the SDK phase? You know, your Web2, you guys are pulling different modules from everywhere and doing less customization. It seems is that wrong, or is that on par?
I'd say compared to like the last cycle, like your wording of this is the SDK phase, I think is accurate. Because it used to be like 2017, 2018, that down cycle, we were still just connecting to RPC nodes and having to know off the cuff what the right calls would be. So you have to like know the API calls, know how they're structured, and then like build your own indexers, do everything yourself. And I think now you're seeing all these ecosystem players have SDKs out, quite literally. So there's still maybe too many options. Like it's kind of a flat plane with like Ethereum ecosystem as a clear front runner. But yes, there's like modules, things you can plug in, and now the work and the customizations go into business logic and actually building applications instead of having to build infrastructure on top of that. So we're not recreating infrastructure. We're able to like create fun apps.
So I agree with that sentiment. I think the only place where I kind of deviate is that there is these SDKs coming, but it's more twofold, where we're going to have the core SDKs, which represent, the infrastructure and the protocol, and then the SDKs that represent the interaction with the end facing, consumer, be it the wallets, whatever. So I think the SDKs are kind of twofold in how they consolidate, because when we think back to the Web2 space, it was one library that did everything. So I think we're kind of seeing this like divergence of SDKs into two topics, really. Your front end and back end, but really your back end is just the global network. How do you interact with that infrastructure? Because infrastructure, even though it's still relatively complex and ever changing, it's pretty standardized once you start looking at different RPC providers. No matter if you're looking at Infura, Alchemine, QuickNode, whatever, you could. It's pretty standard across the board. The question becomes, how do you actually form a request or form a transaction on the front end in a standardized way, in a consistent way? And I think that's the big issue.
Yeah, what's interesting with Web3 now is, which is good and bad. It's like it's nice that data is starting to get the exposure that it should have gotten earlier, but that's okay. But it's scaling the data infrastructure is really difficult, I think, compared to Web2. I don't know. Maybe you guys can correct me, but like the API requests. They're really expensive, right? And so in Google, we had them basically subsidize a lot of things in the early 2000s, and I wasn't hitting APIs and things like that. So maybe it was similar. As a consumer, though, it was definitely easy to get access to data. And I guess as a consumer of Web3, it's not easy yet because nobody's really made it easy. But I guess they won't be paying for it in the end. Maybe in Web3 they will, in the way they did in Web2. Go ahead, Brock.
Like I was going to say maybe the closest comparison to Google and Web3, like in this regard, would be Etherscan. So like you can show up, get whatever data you want. It's free to use, and you don't really have to think about the API calls underneath. I think the big part that's missing, or not missing, but the big difference is like getting data out of Etherscan. It's like still, what do you do with it? With Google, you're always linked out to articles and web pages and other content. Etherscan, that is the raw data, and so there's, I don't know, not a whole lot of use if you don't know what you're doing.
I think in that thing, just in my own professional and in our personal, and even in the projects we worked on, at the end of the day, I think the biggest issue is not just that. I think it's consistency. Data consistency is just such a huge issue, especially when you're thinking about, as you start scaling up the amount of TPS transactions per second, you start getting these bigger chains and these more complex distributed systems to allow for more productivity and more, functional end user products. You're going to start having a lot of inter P2P, peer-to-peer noise, which is going to affect that end quote unquote user data. So data consistency is going to be a huge issue. Whereas in Web 2, everything lived within, an on-prem server farm or, a dedicated server rack. So it was very easy to kind of say, okay, we're excluding a lot of kind of the components that are making our life easy. We just care once the data is here, this is kind of the source of truth. Whereas in Web3, the source of truth still needs to be figured out. If there's a mistake, they have to roll back, change the chain, then the time it takes to index, the time it takes to make those computations, the time it takes to make those analyses. It's I don't want to say it's a logarithmic kind of exponential growth in time, but it compounds, and that compounds depending on if you're in building a financial product or some other product might make it pointless, right? If anyone did high frequency trading on the blockchain, it would be completely pointless because at the end of the day, we, in the Web3 space, we're looking at transactions per 14 seconds, roughly, per block, and then looking back at those blocks. Whereas in high frequency trading, they're resolving transactions within seconds. So, you lose a lot of profitable and a lot of large use cases when it comes to the inconsistency of the data that comes off chain. It almost seems like you need an indexing company. Yeah, it almost seems like you need some way of figuring out consistency and supporting that consistency.
Problem is less about content discovery and almost more content creation.
Correct.
Data's out there, and now you need to make it. Like what? Why should somebody see it? What's the point?
But there's the consistency component still, because at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you're consistently giving accurate metrics or accurate understanding of the content that was created. So if that's fully decentralized, there's still going to be some degree of arbitration or bufferage where you will not actually, it's not as simple as you committing a database transaction to a database, whereas committing it to a P2P network, it might take, it's almost like banks settling their funds at the end of the day, at the end of the market. They need to settle what is true. So that's kind of my concern when it comes to this whole bridge of data.
Yeah. Well, that's where, for the most part, I'd say most use cases do not need real-time data, not up to the millisecond. You could be a minute behind and
know the difference.
It won't make any actual difference. And then
but hopefully that is the goal in the future. How it's possible, I don't know, but that should be probably a goal if this is supposed to change the way that we do things.
For sure.
So I think we kind of deviated, but the question now becomes is there the opportunity, is there still ample opportunity within the VC world to start a Web3 space and is a Web3 company, and is it smart?
I was going to say, it's definitely the right time to be building, not necessarily the right time to get funding for what you're building. Everybody's kind of in a wait and see pattern, especially with the down market and FTX collapse.
Interest rates. Yeah, interest rates are up.
Interest rates, just all of it. Yeah. So like VCs and investors, they have capital, but they're afraid to deploy it. And they're struggling with existing portfolio companies that are struggling in the down market. But if you're building now and positioned for the next upcycle, you should definitely ride that wave.
So here's the question: what's the risk level? What's their risk appetite? Because at the end of the day, inflation's going to eat that. If they're not deploying capital, it's getting eaten away, right? So, it's almost like what's the risk benefit level there at that point?
But I don't know the financial inner workings of VCs, but I imagine they have a lot of ways to.
Come on, Brock. You're all knowing.
It's probably not sitting in cash in their bank. Yeah,
you're all knowing. Come on.
I'm sure they have methods to beat or at least keep up with inflation, even if it's not invested in startups.